All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Discovering Multifamily Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Anthony Scandariato with Red Knight Properties. And today we have a special guest here with us, Mike Branam, coming at us from Denver, Colorado. And he has over 20 years of experience in the real estate technology space. He's been a part of many different successful prop tech startups. We've talked a lot about prop tech on our show. And his prop tech company specifically cater the multifamily industry. So couldn't be on a better show than this, right, Mike? And, Mike's been around. He helped launch Rentbits, which is a pretty, fast growing company in 2008, if any of you remember Rentbits. And, has a lot of, prop tech experience, recently as well. He's now the Director of Multifamily Sales at PointCentral, which is what we're going to focus our conversation on here, which is a property automation platform to apartment owners and operators. So very simply, I believe it's owned by alarm.com, which is in over 6 million homes across the United States, and really excited to have him here. And obviously there's been a lot of changes to the operations side and how, real estate operators, or at least I hope the good ones, would implement, different technology to streamline their operations, reduce costs, increase revenue by being able to track in real time what exactly is going on at your property. So thanks for coming on, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Awesome. So talk about just your high level on kind of 2022 and moving forward. There's a lot of owners and operators in the multifamily space, some that have been around longer than others. And it's kind of, I would say, a little challenging to get the older owners over to implement some technology. Newer operators seem more open to it. So kind of high level on the market, and then love to hear about what's going on at PointCentral.
Sure. Thanks. Well, I think to kind of look at today and tomorrow, we may have to look back, a little bit. And from what I've seen and experienced, I helped co-found the industry's first sort of smart apartment platform called Remotely several years ago. And at the time, it was really ahead of its time. And then, fast forward to 2017 and the smart home movement started to gain some legs. We saw a lot of early attention from Google and from Amazon. So that exists. What's been interesting to me is, a handful of years ago, going to a lot of the industry events and trade shows and serving on panels, it really centered around the resident piece and how can we sort of monetize this amenity to fuel rent growth. And that's still a thing today. But what's really been most eye-opening for me is the triggering event was COVID. What that sort of forced for, to your point, kind of out with the old, in with the new. I think a lot of folks were forced to look at the new because COVID was something that it needed a response. And it started with self-guided tours. And that was a way for owners and operators to say, hey, people still need a place to live. How do we provide this in a safe, convenient way, even when our leasing specialists may be working from home? Maybe when we've sort of drawn down hours of operation for our staff because of their comfort level in interacting in maybe a smaller model apartment unit with someone that may or may not have had COVID. That was a thing. So self-guided tours was that triggering event. And to me, what it inspired was kind of a full technology evaluation of access control, guest entry, in-unit technology, and the like. And so you have these smart home ecosystems that can do all of those things. It doesn't have to be fragmented. And I think that's where a lot of operators saw an opportunity to sort of untangle the different technologies that may have existed. They have an intercom or a guest entry solution that didn't talk to the access control solution, and none of it talked to the in-unit solution, and maybe none of it integrated with their property management software. So there was this moment where groups were able to say, okay, we like this as an amenity for our residents. So our residents are demanding technology. Some of them are even bringing in their own smart home technology type devices. But how does it work for us? And I think that's where this movement is really gaining a lot of traction, that it really checks boxes for sort of everyone. And I like to say that it's one of those products or solutions or technologies that it's better for the building, it's better for the staff, it's better for the asset owner and operator, and it's great for the resident too. So that's what I've seen over the last several years in 5 minutes.
Sure. Yeah. And who would you say your archetype customer is for this, what you're working on today? There's a lot of different technology where they're utilizing, you mentioned intercom systems, which works great for walk-up apartment buildings, I would say 4 stories and up, and let's say minimum of 20 units or whatever the case may be. For something like that, and that talks to different systems as well, probably doesn't make sense for maybe standalone single story assets that are, on the same lot, but they're, apart from each other. Or maybe it does. I don't know. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so guest entry or the intercom is something that's been around for a really long time. And to your point, whether that's garden style or mid-rise, high-rise, that's something that's been in place. Again, with COVID and even pre-COVID, package delivery has been just kind of this wave of challenge for multifamily staff members, because they've almost become part-time or even full-time package management personnel. You take that on its own and just this influx of more folks just clicking and having Amazon come to them. You take prospective residents that are showing up for a self-guided tour that need to pass through that common area access point. Then you take meal delivery and dog walkers, just other folks that don't work at the property, they don't live at the property, but they need access to the property. So what we've seen is a lot of intercoms that, maybe, some of the telephone-based intercoms that have been out there for a while, these legacy systems that need to be modernized in a way that allows for third parties to access, or these modern video type intercoms that sort of give someone a visual verification, video call that streams to the app to either enable or disable access. Where that fits seemingly is at most properties nowadays, just because it's this, in some ways it's been viewed as a barrier. It's really more of like a filter or an opportunity to make sure who's on property, when they're there, why they're there, and if you're going to enable that type of access. So we're seeing that gain a lot of traction. But kind of going back to some of the initial points, those types of systems have to integrate with the larger kind of smart home or the technology ecosystem. Otherwise, they do become a barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. And does it integrate? How important is it to integrate it with maybe the HVAC components and maybe leak detection in toilets? So we're talking about different types of sensors for maybe water and some other things. So I see a lot of different maybe companies that either came out in 2020, or I don't even know if they're still going to be around, but they seem to just do one thing, and then you have to sign up for different services through 10 different vendors. So like you said, and then they don't talk to each other, and that's when you're trying to manage I would say for this, a lot of it I'm sure is used in maybe Class B, Class A properties. It becomes a nightmare for management. So what type of properties has this been used under? I haven't really seen it. We own a lot of, I would say, Class C, C plus properties. So we haven't seen a lot of that. We do have intercoms, some other components to what we're talking about, we don't have. So just love to hear that as well.
Sure. To take any property and technology can probably make things better, whether it's better for the residents, better for the staff. Is it a risk mitigation type of a tool for an aging asset? We're seeing it everywhere. I think the tip of the spear on adoption was sort of Class A, new construction, have to have it. They want to future-proof and modernize. Class A's and really Class B that's saying, hey, the B's not trying to be an A, but it wants to be the best darn B on the block. right? There's a really sort of simple way to provide a modern type of an amenity, but also just sort of take a look at the entire technology package and say, wow, I think a community technology package makes sense here, because it starts to actually loop in access control, guest entry, in-unit technology. It integrates with their Yardi or RealPage or whatever primary property management software they're utilizing. So we're seeing that. Student housing, absolutely. The students today, they haven't existed in a world without their phone. So they're really demanding that type of technology. A lot of the student housing assets that are out there are extremely nice. Really, higher end on the rent scale, very nice sort of off-campus type living. And there's a need, especially when you have 2, 3, 4, 5 students in a particular unit, there's a need to have sort of seamless access to the property. And definitely a massive opportunity for energy recapture, just because they're maybe kind of first time, away from the nest. They may not know how to utilize energy consumption or conservation in a way that maybe they would a little bit further along in their lives. So, there's different types of asset classes and profiles that this is now making sense for. We're even seeing it in more of the workforce housing environment, where they're saying, hey, look, this is an aged asset. We may not be really moving forward with this because of the resident benefits, but we have an aging HVAC system. We want to be proactively alerted when there's a problem. So we take this kind of maintenance model that used to be very reactive. We shift it from proactive to even preventative, where you're being notified if there is a water leak, or even being notified when there's high flow in a certain unit, that, kind of that invisible silent killer of water that you don't know if it's running 200 gallons a day until you see your water bill. Let's start notifying folks in advance of those things from taking place. And that makes a lot of sense for a workforce housing type product that may be operating on a smaller budget.
Right. And now, let's say it is workforce housing type product, and I'm assuming you're working with the property owners, right? 100% of the time. So how does that work in terms of setting up? And, if your goal is to have an all-encompassing platform that manages all those different categories, do the owners get to pick and choose what they want in terms of what's being offered, and who sets it up? How long does it take to set up? Obviously, there's probably different pricing models in terms of upfront and ongoing. So love to hear those points.
Sure. For us, it's really, in everyone in the space, really, if we're doing what we should be doing, it's really being consultative and trying to understand what's really the end game here. What's the desire for the property? What are you looking to accomplish? If there's a history of water issues, a history of maybe HVAC issues, maybe you start with thermostats and sensors. If there's an opportunity to weave in access control and intercom entry, and there's interest in self-guided tours, then you have to really take that owner or operator kind of through the journey of what a community automation platform looks like, and identify the areas where, wow, we didn't know that could help us in that way. So being really consultative and being a guide throughout the process is extremely important. And then identifying the types of products and services that make sense. Overall, what I love about this is, a lot of changes that we have in multifamily, whether, we're changing things cosmetically, carpet paint, whatever the case may be, it's pretty time and labor intensive, right? When we talk about the technology aspect of this, whether it's lights, locks, thermostat, sensors, you can get in and out of a unit in 30 to 40 minutes. We get, and now you take your basic 200 unit community, you're not talking about a long turnaround time to get in and out of each unit, because it's really a cookie cutter install. Once you do it once or twice in the community, then you sort of rinse and repeat. And then from there, just syncing it with the property management software, which, PointCentral and other types of groups have these integrations in place. This is a really quick retrofit turnaround time without having to get behind the walls, get into the ground. For us, we're cellular, so we don't have to implement community Wi-Fi to ensure this is going to work.
Right. No, completely understood. So, on the ground, I think you answered most of the question. I guess you really work with the property managers in terms of what they think would be beneficial, and then the owners obviously, because there might be a disconnect between the two. But that makes a lot of sense. So in terms of the other features, so we talked a lot about, I love the word preventative maintenance, especially with alerts. And then let's talk a little bit more about the integration side, which will be the last point of focus on the podcast type of thing. You mentioned Yardi. What other property management software does this integrate with, and kind of how does it integrate? You mentioned alerts. So do the alerts show up on the property management software as well? Like, what's the integration?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, being on site, what we've learned is that, day to day, that if you're a Yardi shop, whether it's Yardi, RealPage, Entrata, Resman, whether you're whatever platform you're working on, you're usually sort of living in that system. And the goal is, when you implement community technology solution, we want to keep you there. We want to keep you in that system, so you're not having to kind of log in and out of different platforms and having to remember, you shouldn't have to duplicate data in multiple systems. So the goal is to keep you there. What does that look like? Because the integrations really operate behind the scenes, and the main sort of areas that we focus on in the integration is work orders, which helps maintenance go keyless and not having to wait for keys or manage keys or work in and out of different units and having to bring 9-10 keys along, just for 2, 3, 4 work orders. So the work order component to it, and the move in and the move out process. And so a quick example there is, if you're living in Yardi and you're moving a resident into a unit, behind the scenes, the integration in real time will ensure that the incoming resident receives their welcome email, the download to the app, and now they have a smart apartment within a matter of 30 seconds. What I love about the outgoing piece of this is, if that resident now moves out, property manager moves them out of the system, they not only, the outgoing resident, of course, loses access, but what I really like is now the task automations kick in, the thermostat goes into a vacant unit mode, door locks, and now you're good. So maintenance isn't having to hustle up to 10 or 12 units a day to sort of shut them down or to put them in energy management mode. They don't have to worry about the exposure or risk of that door being unlocked. So it's taking a lot of time off of the plate of maintenance and leasing, and also protecting the asset. You mentioned earlier, so I live in Denver, and this actually happened about a week and a half ago. True story. We went from about 85 degrees to a foot of snow the next day. So for folks that live and work in multifamily, it's not uncommon to say, hey, I'm going to have my air conditioning on one day. What if I leave town and now it snows, and now you have pipe problems and water bursting? And I haven't met a property manager yet that hasn't had, it's kind of a nightmare story about water, and it's preventable. But the problem is, when it's not prevented, it's really expensive, that type of damage. So that just doesn't have to happen anymore. And so when you have these types of systems in place, you're really, it's not replacing what our folks do on site, but it does make their job a lot easier. And so the asset owner loves that, because it's mitigating risk and it's increasing the value of the property. And the operating team loves that as well, because it just makes them more efficient in their day-to-day job.
Yeah, like what you said too, you're not trying to replace any jobs. You're trying to complement the workforce with your system and just make life easier for everybody involved. When you have owners sign up, are they usually for this type of technology? And we don't need to get into costs or anything on this show, but are you usually seeing owners treat it as a capital expense item, like you said, that it would, it's going to increase the value? Or because it's really, to me, it's probably a one-time expense, but you have maybe monthly charges as well. You don't have to get into what that looks like, but just wondering how that would work to, wonder how that works and it attracts, and how that affects the bottom line. But in reality, like you said, there's probably a net benefit, because the R&M goes down, because you get the alerts and some other efficiencies start to take place.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the dollars and cents make a ton of sense when you look at it, and how it's done. It really sort of depends on the budget and how a group may want to go about it. There might be budget to implement this type of technology. We've seen some groups really roll it into CapEx because there's a budget there, and they'll pay for the recurring for 2-3 years in advance just to keep that as a capital expenditure. Some will look at the operating expenditure and say, hey, look, we know that the rent lift that we can get from this will significantly offset our OpEx. And so it pencils out that way too. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of evaluate it, and a lot of flexibility as well in how it can be implemented.
Yeah, very interesting. And what markets do you operate in?
Every market in the country. So, you mentioned earlier, so PointCentral is owned by Alarm.com. So we have north of 7 million systems in place, homes nationwide, that's single family, multifamily, vacation homes, et cetera. So there's, for us, it's really important that we can not only, reach every market, but we have strategic service providers in every market that are a phone call away, which is really important for our customers.
That's awesome. Mike, how can my audience find you? What's the best way?
Sure. For me personally, Mike Branam at PointCentral.com. Also available on just going to the website, and the submission form will find me as well. So any questions, let us be a guide, let us help, serve you and understand how we can be of benefit.
Awesome. And we'll have a link to Mike's website and email in our social media platform description, as well on iTunes. And if you liked what you heard and or saw today, please give us a rating and review. It would help Mike and I get our message out to a greater audience. So we really appreciate that, and looking forward to speaking to you again soon, Mike.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.